also don't believe that there's any difference between business ethics and ethics, legal ethics and ethics. Ethics is ethics.
So that I think that in most cases being ethical is good business, and being unethical is lousy business.
And the most important single fundamental thing of success in business is to build your house on a solid foundation of integrity, of a solid foundation of ethics.
Hello. You've just seen a few brief clips taken from interviews we conducted during the making of this program. These are highly successful business people, people who think that ethics in business is very important. During this program, you'll be hearing more from these executives, as well as listening to some young people who faced ethical dilemmas early on in their careers. Business ethics. What are we talking about? Some people might say that it's nothing more than an oxymoron, a contradiction in terms like jumbo shrimp. That's not what we think. To the people who've made this program, and to those for whom they speak, ethics in business is no different than ethics in life.
The worst thing I think you can do is to set one set of code of principles for your business life, and another set for your personal life, and another set for the way you play basketball or squash, and another set for the way you treat, it all ought to be part of the same belief, set of values and beliefs.
We think that good ethics is good business, not from a high moral standpoint, but rather from really a business aspect. Your customer needs to trust you. He needs to know that you will do what you say you will do, and in order to do that, he has to have respect for the kind of business that you do.
The pressures we face in business are unique. In addition to being responsible to others, the need to succeed and excel is great. Failure can have a significant price, and the pressure this brings shouldn't be underestimated. But facing the unique ethical challenges that business brings need not be overwhelming.
Well, we've been in the Caterpillar business a long time, and we have known lots of politicians and lots of buyers for big contractors who would accept money on the side. I think we've known far more who would throw you out the window at the suggestion of it. But we've known that, and we had always taken the stance that we would not pay off, not because we're so goody two-shoes, but simply because there's no place to stop.
Yes, I did. Once. As I said before, I was only employed for about a year at my last job, and during that time, I had a chance to take advantage of a travel opportunity. It was for a week. It was my hometown of all places, and during that time, well, I stayed with my mother. You see, I have this friend who works in a big hotel down there. I don't think I want to give their name. And as a favor to me, he gave me some fake receipts, dummied up copies to make it look like I'd stayed there. Oh, and he gave me a stack of blank restaurant receipts from the hotel. So when I went back to work, I turned them in. Now, I've thought about it a great deal, and I still maintain that what I did was not a complete wrong. I mean, it wasn't like it was stealing. They would have paid the money anyway. It just went to me instead of the hotel, that's all. And I had to stay somewhere. I was very conservative about the amounts I turned in. I mean, everyone does it. Well, anyway, you asked. And I haven't done it again.
Over the years, our family, our religion, our community and schools have helped to shape our values. Thou shalt not steal is as much a social agreement as it is a religious dictum. And curiously, there's a fundamental stereotype about ethics that takes root here. Some people call it the Sunday school approach to ethics. A lot of us have come to think of moral dilemmas as strictly right or wrong. And although some of them are, the overwhelming majority are not so clear-cut. Weighing all of the choices in an ethical situation, each with their trade-offs, can be very difficult. But for someone who carries a black or white mentality, making a decision among the many shades of gray can be impossible. Paralyzed when forced to make such a decision, they often do nothing.
So what you've got to do is use good old-fashioned judgment, have a strategic plan, and say, look, we are going to invest for the future, and then communicate that philosophy to not only the stockholders, but also to the employees, and then the outside environment that you deal within.
The Marshall Fields and the John Wanamaker's and some of the great institutions of America have operated on the principle that the customer is always right, and that, you know, profit is not a right, profit is a reward. It's a reward for doing a good job for the customer, you know, and so the people that do that get somewhere. The people that don't are struggling. The people that look for the shortcut, the prisons are filled with them.
How can business people, knowing a situation is questionable, go ahead and make a poor ethical choice? For some, the problem is simply poor management, a lack of intelligent information, or a lack of thinking through the problems. For many, it's the lack of ethical training. Without educational exposure to ethics, it's not surprising that good business people make poor ethical decisions. Organizational pressures and pressures of time to perform and succeed. These are givens in the business world.
Last year I was working for a large brokerage house here in town, and let me tell you, the pressure is just enormous. I mean, performance is everything. They're looking for comers, new clients, new accounts. The more you make, the more they make. And let's face it, the draw they're paying doesn't even cover expenses. Do you have any idea how much I spend on clothing alone each month? Well, the reality is that I had a hot prospect, a limited oil and gas partnership. Now, maybe it wasn't right for everybody. Forget it. I said I'd tell you how it really was. Except for extremely diversified portfolios, those interested in a high-risk, high-return situation, it wasn't right for most people. I sold it to anyone who would buy. And I suppose initially I believed in it. The problem was people's life savings. Married couples, people just wanting to get their feet wet, they all invested. I pushed this partnership like there was no tomorrow. And don't think my bosses didn't know. They had to sign off. They didn't ask. They didn't care. Well, for a while we were all making a fortune, and then, well, then the bottom dropped out of the oil market. Talk about a mess. I stepped way over the line. Until you're caught up in it, making the kind of money that you have only dreamed about, you just don't know how far you're going to go.
Ivan Boesky was obsessed with success. To those who knew him, his wealth mirrored the seemingly endless potential inherent in a free market system. But to the world, Ivan Boesky became a cultural icon, the man who epitomized the crime of insider trading. No one presumes that exposure to training in ethics would have changed Ivan Boesky's life. but it does illustrate how far off course one can veer in the business world. Because no matter how successful Ivan Boesky had become, his legacy shall forever be interwoven with his crime. In the world of business, finance, stock, futures, and options, huge sums of money change hands in exchanges like this around the world. Here in Chicago's Mercantile Exchange, for example, billions of dollars worth of futures and options are traded on this floor every business day. The public ownership of companies is a cornerstone of our free market system. Certainly the freedoms it affords means that there is the potential for abuse. In the 70s, the issue was bribing foreign governments. In the 80s, insider trading. But there will always be someone trying to beat the system. And of course, there will always be rules, laws to control such abuses. The important thing, though, is that ethics goes beyond compliance. It involves making fundamental judgments about what is right and what is wrong.
I was just talking to somebody yesterday who was writing the 10K for his company's business, and he said that his employees had taken last year's 10K and updated it and really didn't tell some of the problems which are going on in the business this year. There'd been a big postal increase, sales were down, and he, who's not a lawyer but a businessman, said he had a responsibility to the shareholders to tell the truth, to show the red flags, to show that business was not the same as last year, but it was different. Even if it was not materially different, there were things starting now that might be material later. And that's a perfectly good example. He was actually more moral than the compliance. That is to say, the document that his employees did probably would have complied with the rules, but what he did complied with the spirit of the rules, which is to tell the shareholders the state of the company.
We've talked a lot about making decisions that are ethically sound, but what we haven't talked about is what sort of guidelines can be applied in making these decisions. Over the years, ethicists have developed a series of models that, when applied, provide a systematic framework for making these decisions. Certainly, one must ask, what is morally good or bad in a given situation? And what moral obligations or duties do I have, if any? When considering these questions, the models provide the fundamentals for addressing the complex issues one can face in business. To give you an idea of what these models involve, let's briefly look at a few of them. The Golden Rule is a model many of you are familiar with. The principle, do unto others as you'd have others do unto you, is based in most world religions. A variation of this model says that people should be consulted on actions that affect them and should give their consent before the action is taken. The enlightened self-interest model essentially says that one should pursue self-interest in a way that does not arbitrarily or unfairly harm other people. The underlying assumption of this model is that when people pursue self-interest in this way, it raises the general level of prosperity for everyone. And the utilitarian model states that one should choose the course of action that creates the greatest good for the greatest number of people. It's obvious from these models that there are different ways to look at and address ethical situations in business, and certainly there are some you will agree with more than others. These differences of opinion as to what's the right course of action will always exist, and there will always be trade-offs involved. For this reason, reasonable people will often come up with differing solutions. Approaching ethical problems in a systematic way is what separates ethical reasoning from pressure-sensitive, haphazard approaches to problem solving. Most of the corporations we interviewed have established a framework for ethical decision-making. Each have an established credo or statement of business ethics that is printed and distributed. By providing specific guidelines to management and their employees, they help ensure a consistent standard when ethical situations are faced.
Then 1982 happened, and the Tylenol crisis hit. And we said to ourselves, we looked at each other and said, our responsibilities are inherent and they're written out right here in the credo. The credo says the consumer comes first. Our first responsibility should be to the mothers, doctors, nurses, etc., all of our customers. And we really had no choice but to make the decision we did in the Tylenol crisis. of taking that product off the market to protect the public. How could we do otherwise and face our employees? It would have been hypocrisy at its best or its worst.
Now, if we didn't have that clear understanding, people would say, well, I didn't understand that. And that's been one of the reasons behind this. We don't want any associate to be able to say, I didn't understand that. You never told me that. And that's why I think that if you can communicate, if you can foster that open exchange, that if I'm uncomfortable with something, let's talk about it. And if it's a problem, we'll get it resolved.
In talking with the people you've seen, we discussed how and why their companies make ethical decisions. And as you've heard, each was a variation of the same theme. To each, it made good business sense. And more than that, to each, being ethical was the right thing to do. Each had a philosophy that extended beyond the business world. And each had a deep conviction in themselves, a conviction that was based in integrity, values, and pride in themselves and their businesses. That is the challenge that you are left with, developing an ethical base that helps you make the best decisions possible while keeping pace in today's pressure-filled business world.
Samuel Butler said that every person's home is a portrait of himself. And I think a lot of times in business, you could paraphrase that to say that every person's business is a portrait of themselves. I think that this business is an extension of my personality. And therefore, being the symbol of it and having your name on the building and your picture around and everything, I think that it says there's no place for me to hide, certainly. When I walk in the store, the customer is right there, and so that my values are right on both my shirt sleeves.
Well, that's a little like what is called the sunshine law. That is, anything that you do or say, what if you saw that in print the next morning in a newspaper headline, or your family saw that? And if that decision that you've made in some way would pass those particular tests, I'll guarantee you anything you do in a business, no matter what that may be in the way of actions, would be on a highest level. And it's just, again, nothing more than common sense in practicing what you and I know to be right, and that is respect for a person, treating those persons like you'd want to be treated yourself, and then putting in place the type of reward and recognition system that tells people, yes, we are looking for individuals that have a balance. We want you to achieve your revenue objectives, but we want you to do those things on the basis of the highest level of fairness.
And we remind ourselves that that door says J.C. Penney. It doesn't say Bill Howell, it doesn't say Bob Gill, it says J.C. Penney. And that sign is going to be around here long after I'm gone. It's here since Mr. Penney has gone. And we're going to strive to have these standards, these ethics, exist in the next generation.
Well, I think that if my dad could see me now, I think that what I would like him to see is that he could go down in my store and he could talk to every customer coming out of my store and ask them about me, and that the things that they would say about integrity and about caring and about honesty and about ethics and everything, that the customers would say it for me, I hope, and that's what I try to do. I think that if my dad, were alive today, he would say, attaboy, Stu, that's what I hope you do, Here's another saying that says, would the boy you were be proud of the man you are? And I would say that the boy I was would be proud of the man I am, and I would wish that on anyone, because that's really the bottom line.